dead. You're through. You've reached the end of the line. How can you go to the next step? How can you combine amino acids to make protein if you don't have any energy? How can you combine sugar and purines and pyrimidines and stuff like that to make DNA and RNA if you don't have any energy? Those steps require enormous quantities of energy, but you don't have any energy. The very purpose of the trap is to remove the product from the energy source. So what? You just sit there and nothing happens. Well, you just gradually deteriorate, you see. So you see, the evolution is caught between a rock and a hard place here. With energy, he's dead. His product is destroyed. Without energy, he's dead because he can't go any farther. You see, they don't tell people that. But those are the hard facts, you see. That has led Dr. D.E. Hull a number of years ago. Fact is, he published an article in Nature. After he had reviewed all these processes, the rates of formation, the rates of destruction, and totaled up everything, he found that the concentration of these substances would be almost vanishingly small, much too little to have life evolve. And he said this: the physical chemist, guided by the proved principles of chemical thermodynamics and kinetics, cannot offer any encouragement to the biochemist who needs an ocean full of organic compounds to form even lifeless coacervates. What is a coacervate? Lifeless coacervate? Just a blob of oily material that might settle out of the, if you get enough of this stuff, has no organization, no complexity. Even to get that, you've got to have an ocean full of this stuff. And he says that the chemist, guided by his fundamentalist religious views, didn't say that at all, did he? What did he say? The physical chemist, guided by the proved principles of science, cannot offer any encouragement for that sort of thing. And so he concluded, you see, that these experiments lead nowhere. You can't even get simple substances, let alone complicated substances. But let us suppose, in spite of all this, we had an ocean full of amino acids and things like that. Now, obviously, they have to be combined to make very complicated things. Now, here we see a diagram or structure of a protein molecule. This is an enzyme. It's ribonuclease, one of these digestive enzymes that we have in our system for digesting our food. In this case, more specifically, the ribonucleic acid that we get in our food. Proteins, as I've mentioned, are made up of amino acids. The average protein has 400 amino acids. Ribonuclease has only 124. Now, how did we get these enzymes? I mean, you cannot have life without enzymes. The most primitive form of life that you can imagine would have to have hundreds of different kinds of enzymes and hundreds of different kinds of DNA and RNA molecules, which are even more complicated than proteins. How did we get these things? How did they come to existence? The evolution says purely by chance. I mean, before life, there was no reproduction, and natural selection, which they imagined was essential for evolution, is totally dependent upon reproduction. If you have no reproduction, you have no natural selection. No molecule reproduces itself. That's absolutely impossible. No DNA molecule does that. No virus does that. They are produced only by living cells. So there could be no natural selection before life. So it's totally dependent upon chance. Now, we can calculate the probability of something like this happening. We have 124 amino acids, 20 different kinds that must be arranged in precise order. Just like the letters of a sentence when you construct a sentence. How do you make sense? How do you convey information? By arranging the 26 letters of the alphabet in precise order. The same is true here. We have this enzyme, ribonucleic acid. It does something very precise because of the way those amino acids are arranged. Take the same 20 amino acids, arrange them in a different way, and you get hemoglobin. Or you take 188 of the same kind of amino acids, arrange them in a different way, and you get human growth hormone. They are proteins. They do specific things due to the precise arrangement of those amino acids. Now, the evolutionist says this just happened by accident, just happened by chance. Well, now you can calculate the probability of something like that happening. You see, in this ribonuclease, we have these amino acids arranged in precise order. Now, the first one is lysine. What's the probability that lysine would be in number one position? Well, let us assume there are only 20 amino acids. On the primitive Earth, that's impossible, but we'll make it as easy as possible for the evolutionists. We had only these 20 amino acids. They were all left-handed. What would be the probability that we had lysine number one? Obviously, one chance out of 20. What about the first two amino acids, lysine followed by threonine? What's the probability of that happening? 1 over 20 times 1 over 20, that's one chance out of 400. What about the first three? 1 over 20 times itself 3 times, one chance out of 8,000. What about the first 4? One chance out of 160,000. What about the first 5? One chance out of 3,200,000. What about the first 6? One chance out of 64 million. What about 124 amino acids be arranged in the right order? That's 1 over 20 times itself, 124 times. Now, let me assure you, that will never happen on this earth in 5 billion years. If you could assemble those amino acids at random, 124 of them, 1 trillion times a second for 5 billion years, the probability that they will arrange precisely as we see in the structure of ribonuclease is essentially impossible. Let me illustrate it something more simple. If I'd ask 17 of you people to line up here in front of the auditorium, and then to rearrange yourself in a second way, then a third way, then a fourth way, and keep doing that time after time after time. How many times could 17 people line up without lining up twice in the same way? You're not going to believe me. It's more than 355 trillion. More than 355 trillion different ways. See, I told you you wouldn't believe me. All right, after this meeting, then you just get together with 16 of your friends and you try it. Well, the universe will be gone before you finish making all those tries. More than 355 trillion. In other words, if I wrote down the names of 17 people and they lined up, they'd have only one chance out of 355 trillion of lining up the way I had written their name down on a piece of paper. That's only 17. Add one more, make it 18, it's 6.5 quadrillion. Imagine what it would be for 124. That's not going to happen on this earth, even in 5 billion years by chance. But if it did happen, what would you have? One single molecule of one single protein. That's all. But to get life started, you've got to have billions of tons each of hundreds of different kinds of protein molecules. You've got to have billions of tons each of hundreds of different kinds of DNA and RNA molecules and complex carbohydrates and all of that. That's not going to happen, not on this earth or anywhere in the universe, you see, in, well, 5,000 billion years, let alone 5 billion years. And even if it did happen, you see, you're not going to get a living cell anyhow. A living cell is much more than just a bag of chemicals. A living cell has membranes. Membranes are very, very complicated structures. You've got to have energy factors. You've got to have protein factors. You've got to have all the genetic material necessary, you see. And even a bacterium has 3 million nucleotides in its DNA molecules arranged in precise order. And it has to be put together precisely, just like the mechanism of your watch. You see, if even one tiny part of that watch is not in the right place, it won't function, will it? That's true of a bacterium or a human cell or whatever we're talking about. It has to be organized precisely, and that doesn't happen. I mean, things just don't naturally get together and make complicated structures. The natural way of things is to disperse, to break down, to deteriorate, as we have formalized by the second law of thermodynamics. What this natural law says, there is a natural tendency for everything to run down and deteriorate and disperse, to become simple and disorganized. There is no natural tendency, you see, for things to become organized and complicated. And yet, if evolution is true, these molecules floating out at random,